The trophy case gleamed under fluorescent lights, each golden figure frozen mid-victory. But real life doesn't freeze. It shatters. And sometimes all it takes is 5 seconds to break everything you thought you knew. Before we dive into today's story, if you find value in these real-life lessons about bullying, resilience, and the hidden battles we all face, please hit that like button and subscribe. Your comments mean the world. They help me understand what resonates with you. And if these stories touch your heart like they touch mine, consider supporting through the thanks button below. Your generosity helps me continue sharing these powerful narratives that need to be heard. Thank you for being here. The morning sun cast long shadows across Westfield High School's parking lot, where a sea of cars told 1,000 different stories. Luxury SUVs bearing football decals sat next to beaten-up sedans held together by rust and prayer. But Grace Anderson's story began with neither she walked. Her worn Converse made soft sounds against the pavement, a rhythmic counterpoint to the chaos erupting around her as students poured from their vehicles. She moved through them like a ghost, earbuds in, eyes down, invisible by choice. The other kids flowed around her in their predetermined streams, athletes to the gym doors, theater kids to the side entrance, stoners to the far corner of the lot. Grace belonged to none of these tributaries. She was something else entirely. Inside. The hallways of Westfield High pulsed with teenage energy. Lockers slammed, voices rose and fell in waves of gossip and laughter. The smell of floor wax mixed with designer perfume and adolescent anxiety. Grace navigated it all with practiced ease, her small frame somehow finding the gaps in the crowd, never bumping shoulders, never making contact. She reached her locker number 847, tucked in a corner where the main hallway branched toward the science wing. Most kids avoided this spot. It was too far from everything that mattered. Perfect for someone who wanted to remain unseen. As she spun the combination, muscle memory taking over, her reflection caught in the metal door, brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, no makeup, features that were pretty in an understated way, the kind of face that could disappear in a crowd or, if needed, command a room. But Grace had made her choice long ago. Every high school has its ecosystem. A voice seemed to whisper through time, maybe a teacher from orientation, maybe her own thoughts. Predators and prey. Alphas and outcasts. The key is knowing which you are. But Grace knew something most didn't. Sometimes the quietest creatures were the most dangerous. The warning bell rang, sending students scurrying. Grace pulled out her AP history textbook, its spine cracked from actual use, unlike the pristine copies carried by kids who relied on spark notes and charm. As she closed her locker, a shadow fell across the metal. "Hey!" She looked up to find Ashley Parker standing there, all 5'8" of student body president perfection. Ashley had the kind of smile that won elections and the kind of grades that won scholarships. She also had something rarer, genuine kindness that hadn't been beaten out of her by 3 years of high school politics. "You're Grace, right? You're in my history class." Grace nodded, pulling out an earbud. Up close, she could see the stress fractures in Ashley's perfect facade, the concealer not quite hiding the dark circles. The way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Listen, I know you're new and everything, but we have this group project coming up, French Revolution. I was wondering if you'd want to partner up, if you haven't already." "Sure," Ashley blinked, clearly expecting more resistance or at least more words. "Oh, great. That's great. we can talk about it more in class. Grace nodded again, already turning to go. But Ashley's hand touched her arm lightly, a gesture so quick Grace almost missed it. Hey, just be careful. Okay, some of the guys here. They can be… Ashley's eyes flicked down the hallway where a group of Letterman jackets had congregated. Just be careful. Then she was gone, heels clicking efficiently toward her first period class, leaving Grace to wonder what exactly had prompted the warning. The answer came in the form of Brandon Hayes. If Westfield High were a kingdom, Brandon would be its warrior prince. 6'2" of carefully sculpted muscle, with the kind of jaw that belonged on movie posters and the kind of arm that could throw a football 60 yards with laser precision. He moved through the hallways like he owned them, because, in every way that mattered to 17-year-olds, he did. Brandon's laugh boomed across the corridor as he held court near the water fountain, his teammates orbiting him like planets around a sun. Kevin Walsh, his best friend and most loyal lieutenant, was recounting some story that required extensive hand gestures and sound effects. The cheerleaders leaned in, hanging on every word, their laughter timed perfectly to Brandon's. It was a performance, Grace realized. Every gesture calculated, every joke tested and refined. She'd seen this before, the way someone could build themselves into a legend, brick by brick, until even they forgot where the performance ended and the person began. She tried to slip past, but Kevin's eyes found her. Yo, B, check it out. New girl alert. The group's attention swiveled toward her like a spotlight. Grace kept walking, but she could feel their eyes dissect her clothes, thrift store, her shoes worn, her lack of makeup weird, her silence weirder. Hey, ghost girl. The name hit her spine like ice water. Not the word itself, but the tone, the casual cruelty of someone who'd never been haunted by anything real. She stopped, turned, met Brandon's eyes. For a moment, something flickered across his face. Confusion, maybe. People didn't usually meet his gaze directly. They looked up at him with admiration or down in submission. But straight on, that was new territory. You deaf or something? Kevin laughed, but it sounded forced. Grace pulled out her other earbud with deliberate slowness. No. Then maybe you should answer when someone's talking to you, Brandon said, taking a step forward. The group sensed blood in the water, their energy shifting from casual to predatory. You weren't talking. You were yelling. Grace's voice stayed level, almost curious. There's a difference. Someone, maybe one of the cheerleaders, actually gasped. In the hierarchy of Westfield High. You didn't correct Brandon Hayes. You especially didn't do it with the kind of calm that suggested you weren't even trying to be insulting. Just factual. Brandon's jaw tightened. Behind him. Kevin muttered something that sounded like freak, but Brandon held up a hand, silencing him. His eyes never left Grace's face. You're new here, so I'll give you a pass, this time, but you might want to learn how things work before I… What? The question hung in the air between them. Grace genuinely seemed to be waiting for an answer. Her head tilted slightly like she was trying to solve a math problem. The bell rang, shattering the moment. Students began moving again, the spell broken. Brandon turned away first, which in high school terms meant he'd lost something. He couldn't quite name what. Watch yourself! He tossed over his shoulder, trying to reclaim some authority. Grace was already walking away, earbuds back in, as if the entire exchange had been nothing more than a minor interruption in her day. But Kevin noticed how Brandon's hands clenched and unclenched at his sides, and Ashley, watching from her classroom doorway, saw the way Grace's fingers trembled slightly as she adjusted her backpack straps. The first domino had been nudged. Now all that remained was to see how they'd fall. First period meant AP History for Grace, which meant 50 minutes of Mr. Peterson's monotone voice explaining the socioeconomic factors that led to the French Revolution. She sat 3 rows from the back, 1 seat from the window, optimal positioning for remaining unnoticed while still being able to see the board. Ashley slipped into the seat beside her just as the final bell rang, bringing with her a cloud of vanilla perfume and barely contained stress. "That was brave," she whispered as Mr. Peterson began distributing handouts. "What you did back there, stupid, but brave." Grace didn't respond, her attention seemingly focused on the worksheet in front of her. But Ashley noticed she was sketching something in the margins of her paper, not doodles or hearts, or the usual high school marginalia, but something that looked almost like diagrams. "Brandon's not used to people standing up to him," Ashley continued, keeping her voice low. "His dad played for Ohio State back in the day, almost went pro before he blew out his knee. Now he lives through Brandon. Pushes him hard. Really hard." Grace's pencil paused for just a moment before continuing its movement across the paper. "I'm not trying to gossip or anything," Ashley added quickly. I've known Brandon since middle school. He wasn't always like this. Something changed freshman year when his mom left. His dad got meaner, and Brandon got harder." "Why are you telling me this?" The question was soft, genuinely curious rather than defensive. Ashley considered her answer carefully. "Because I saw something in your eyes when you looked at him, like you understood something the rest of us don't. And because," she hesitated, then plunged ahead, "because I'm tired of watching people get hurt while everyone pretends not to see." Grace finally looked at her, and Ashley was struck by how old her eyes seemed. Not old in years, but in experience, like she'd seen things that had aged her soul. "Sometimes seeing is the most dangerous thing you can do," Grace said quietly, before Ashley could ask what she meant. Mr. Peterson called for their attention, beginning his lecture on the 3 estates of pre-revolutionary France. But as he droned on about nobility and clergy and the crushing weight carried by the 3rd estate, Ashley couldn't help but think about the hierarchies in their own small kingdom. She snuck another glance at Grace's paper. The diagrams were clearer now, bodies in motion, angles and trajectories marked with precise lines. It looked almost like a dance choreography. But there was something violent in the geometry, something that made Ashley's stomach tighten with unease. Meanwhile, across the building in the weight room, Brandon Hayes was taking out his frustration on the bench press. The bar rose and fell with mechanical precision, but his mind kept drifting back to the hallway encounter. "Bro, you've been off all morning," Kevin said, spotting him. "That nobody really got to you." Brandon racked the weights harder than necessary. "She didn't get to me." "Right. That's why you're about to bench press the whole school." Brandon sat up, wiping sweat from his face. Around them, the weight room hummed with activity football players getting in their morning workout. The clink of metal on metal, the underlying smell of competition and testosterone. "There's something off about her," Brandon said finally. "The way she looked at me, like she wasn't scared." "So make her scared. It's what you do." Kevin meant it as a compliment, but something in Brandon's chest twisted at the words. Is that what he did? Made people scared. His phone buzzed, a text from his father. "Coach tells me you're down 2/10 on your 40 time. Unacceptable. Extra training tonight." Brandon's jaw clenched. He stood abruptly. causing Kevin to step back. "After lunch," he said. "The ghost girl. We'll remind her how things work around here." Kevin grinned. "Now you're talking." But as Brandon headed for the showers, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was making a mistake. Something about Grace Anderson didn't add up. The way she'd moved through the hallway crowd without touching anyone, the complete lack of fear in her eyes, the steady tone of her voice, like someone who'd faced down scarier things than high school bullies. He thought of his older brother, Adam, now at Yale on a full academic scholarship. Perfect Adam, who'd never needed football to define him. Perfect Adam, who their father mentioned in every conversation like a weapon. Brandon turned the shower to scalding, letting the water pound against his shoulders. He had a reputation to maintain, a role to play. And if some new girl thought she could upset the balance of power at Westfield High, she needed to learn otherwise. The cafeteria at lunchtime was its own kind of battlefield, long tables divided by invisible lines of social demarcation. The football players held the center tables like high ground. Drama kids clustered near the windows. Honor students commanded the corner by the vending machines. And scattered throughout were the various substrata of high school society, each knowing their place in the food chain. Grace entered through the side door, tray in hand, and surveyed the landscape with tactical precision. She chose a half-empty table near the emergency exit. Good sight lines, multiple escape routes, minimal social interaction required. It was occupied by a few kids who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else, which suited her perfectly. She'd just settled in with her turkey sandwich and apple when the atmosphere in the cafeteria shifted. Conversations dimmed, heads turned. The very air seemed to compress. Brandon Hayes was making his entrance. He moved through the cafeteria like a general reviewing troops. Kevin and 3 other players flanking him. They weren't heading for their usual table. They were heading for her. Grace continued eating, though her peripheral vision tracked their approach. 4 of them. Brandon in the center, Kevin to his right. 2 others she didn't recognize spread out to cut off obvious exits. Classic intimidation formation. The kids at her table suddenly remembered urgent business elsewhere, gathering their trays and scattering like startled birds. Within seconds, Grace sat alone. Brandon pulled out the chair across from her, spinning it around and straddling it backwards, a power move designed to seem casual while taking up maximum space. His teammates remained standing, forming a wall of letterman jackets. "We need to talk about this morning," Brandon said, his voice pitched to carry to the surrounding tables. Already, phones were coming out, held low and casual, but recording nonetheless. Grace took another bite of her sandwich, chewed, swallowed. The silence stretched uncomfortably. "You disrespected me," Brandon continued when it became clear she wasn't going to respond. "In my hallway, in front of my people. That's not how things work here." "Your hallway?" Grace's tone held genuine curiosity. "Did you buy it? I don't see your name on it." Someone at a nearby table stifled a laugh. Brandon's jaw tightened. "Listen carefully. Ghost girl, I own this school, every hallway, every classroom, every inch of it, and everyone in it knows their place. Everyone except you. Apparently." Grace set down her sandwich with deliberate care. When she looked up, Brandon felt that strange sensation again, like she was seeing through him, past the muscle and reputation to something deeper. "I know my place," she said quietly. "Do you know yours?" The words were soft, almost gentle, but they landed like a slap. Brandon's face flushed. Behind him, Kevin shifted restlessly. "Come on, Just, Kevin started, but Brandon cut him off with a sharp gesture. You think you're tough? Brandon leaned forward, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. You have no idea who you're messing with. My father is sitting in the parking lot. The words stopped Brandon cold. He followed Grace's gaze to the window, where indeed his father's black Escalade sat idling in the visitor's space, just as it did every lunch period. Checking up, always watching, always judging. He comes every day, doesn't he? Grace continued, her voice still maddeningly calm. Parks in the same spot, watches to make sure you're being the son he wants you to be. Must be exhausting, performing all the time. Brandon's hands clenched on the back of the chair. You don't know anything about me. I know you're scared. The cafeteria might as well have been a vacuum for how quiet it got. Even the lunch ladies stopped serving to watch. I know you're scared, Grace repeated, because bullies are always scared. The question is, what are you so afraid of? Brandon exploded up from the chair, sending it clattering backward. Grace didn't flinch, didn't even blink. She just watched him with those two knowing eyes. After school, he snarled. Parking lot. We'll see who's scared. I don't fight, Grace said simply. Then you'd better learn. He turned to storm off, his crew falling in behind him. But Grace's voice followed him, soft, but carrying, I said I don't fight. I didn't say I can't. Brandon stopped mid-stride. When he looked back, Grace had already returned to her sandwich, as if issuing cryptic warnings to the school's alpha male was just another lunch activity. The video was uploaded to Instagram before Brandon even made it back to his table. Within minutes, it had 30 views. By the end of lunch, 300. The caption read, New girl owns QB with words, #GhostGirl rising, Brandon shook. But Grace didn't have social media to see it. She finished her lunch in peace, sketched a few more diagrams in her notebook, and prepared for afternoon classes. She didn't notice Ashley Parker watching her from across the cafeteria with a mixture of admiration and dread. She didn't see Coach Davis pull Brandon aside in the hallway for a heated conversation about maintaining composure and college scouts. She definitely didn't see the text Brandon received from his father, heard about lunch, handle it, no excuses. The afternoon crawled by with the peculiar tension that precedes a storm. In every classroom, whispers followed Grace like shadows. Teachers noticed the distraction, but couldn't pinpoint its source. Even Mr. Rodriguez, who prided himself on commanding absolute attention in AP chemistry, found himself competing with the underground current of anticipation. Grace seemed oblivious to it all. She took notes, answered questions when called upon, and continued to exist in her bubble of calm. But those paying close attention might have noticed small things, the way she positioned her chair for quick exits, how her eyes tracked every person who entered the room, the subtle tension in her shoulders that spoke of readiness. Ashley caught up with her between 6th and 7th period. You can't seriously be planning to meet him after school. Grace adjusted her backpack, not breaking stride. I'm not planning anything. I'm going home. He won't let you. Not after what happened at lunch. He'll follow you, corner you. It's what he does. Ashley lowered her voice. Last year, this sophomore Marcus challenged him over something stupid. A girl, I think. Brandon waited until Marcus was alone, got 5 guys to hold him while she trailed off, unable or unwilling to finish. While what? Brandon broke his nose, said it was a football accident. Everyone knew better, but Marcus wouldn't contradict him. Transferred schools a month later. Grace processed this information with the same calm she'd shown all day. Thank you for the warning. That's it. Thank you. Ashley grabbed her arm, surprising them both. You don't understand. Brandon's not just some regular bully. His dad has connections. The police chief is his godfather. The principal played college ball with Mr. Hayes. Brandon could probably get away with murder in this town. Grace gently removed Ashley's hand from her arm. No one gets away with murder. Not really. They might avoid jail, but they never escape what they've done. It follows them, changes them, rots them from the inside out until… She caught herself, blinking as if waking from a trance. I need to get to class. Ashley watched her go, a chill running down her spine despite the warm afternoon. There had been something in Grace's voice just then, something dark and knowing that didn't belong to a 17-year-old girl. The final bell rang at 3:15, sending students flooding toward exits like water breaking through a dam. But instead of the usual chaos of departure, there was an organized flow toward the parking lot. Word had spread. Brandon versus the new girl. The ghost girl who didn't know her place. Grace made it to her locker without incident, methodically packing her homework. She could feel the energy in the building, the anticipation crackling like static electricity. Her phone, a basic flip phone that drew snickers from anyone who saw it, buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Don't be a hero, just apologize. It'll be over quick. A friend. She deleted it without responding and headed for the exit. The crowd was already formed by the time she stepped outside. A rough circle in the parking lot. Brandon at its center. His Letterman jacket off and handed to Kevin, like a knight preparing for battle. The afternoon sun cast long shadows, turning the scene into something out of an old western. Grace kept walking toward the sidewalk, attempting to skirt the edge of the crowd. But they moved with her, the circle shifting, blocking her path. Going somewhere. Brandon's voice carried easily across the space. Grace stopped, sighed, and turned to face him. Home. I have homework. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Brandon stepped forward, rolling his shoulders. You disrespected me. Twice. That requires an answer. I answered you at lunch. No, his voice hardened. You ran your mouth. Now we do this the right way. Grace set down her backpack with deliberate care. The crowd pressed closer, phones out, ready to capture whatever came next. She could see it all, every angle, every possible outcome, every way this could go wrong. Her hands wanted to move, to fall into familiar patterns, but she kept them still. I don't want to hurt you, she said quietly. More laughter, but nervous now. There was something in her stance, in the way she'd positioned her feet, that made people uncertain. Brandon charged. It was a bull rush, designed to overwhelm with pure size and strength. The kind of attack that had won him countless schoolyard fights since elementary school. The kind that worked on people who didn't know how to see violence coming. How to read the telegraph in someone's shoulders, the tell in their eyes. Grace saw all of it. Time slowed, the way it always did when her body remembered what it had been trained for. She could see Brandon's weight distribution too far forward, his hand position reaching to grab, not strike. His eyes focused on her center mass, not tracking movement. She had a dozen options. A simple sidestep and trip, an arm drag, a throw that would put him on his back before he knew what happened. Any of them would end this in seconds. Instead, she chose option 13. At the last possible moment, Grace dropped to one knee and rolled forward, using Brandon's own momentum against him. Her shoulder caught him just below the center of gravity, not an attack. Barely even contact. Just physics. Brandon flew. It wasn't graceful or choreographed like in movies. It was awkward and shocking and real. He went over her completely. Arms windmilling, eyes wide with surprise. The crowd scattered as he landed hard on the asphalt, rolling twice before coming to a stop. Silence. Complete. Absolute silence. Grace stood, dusted off her knee, and picked up her backpack. Brandon lay stunned. Not hurt, but processing what had just happened. He'd charged? She'd… What? He couldn't even explain it. 5 seconds, someone whispered. That was like 5 seconds. Grace looked down at Brandon, and for just a moment, her mask slipped. He saw something in her eyes that made his blood run cold, not anger or triumph, but a deep, boundless sadness. I told you, she said softly, so only he could hear. I don't fight. I survive. There's a difference. Then she walked away, the crowd parting before her like the Red Sea. No one tried to stop her. No one spoke. They just watched her go. This strange girl who'd just rewritten the rules of their small universe. Brandon stayed on the ground longer than necessary. Not from injury, but from shock. When Kevin finally helped him up, his hands were shaking. Did you see? Kevin started. I saw. Brandon's voice was hoarse. I saw her eyes right before. She could have destroyed me. She chose not to. And the crowd began to disperse. The show over, but the implications just beginning. Videos were already uploading, texts flying, the story growing with each retelling. But Ashley Parker, standing at the edge of the parking lot, wasn't thinking about social media or school hierarchies. She was thinking about the look on Grace's face in that final moment. The look of someone who'd won too many fights to think victory meant anything anymore. She was thinking about ghosts, and what kind of tragedy it took to make someone that young already haunted. The video had 17,000 views by the time Grace woke up the next morning. Not that she knew her flip phone couldn't access Instagram, and she'd long ago learned that ignorance was sometimes the only armor against a cruel world. She moved through her morning routine with mechanical precision. Shower, clothes, breakfast toast, and black coffee. Eaten standing at the kitchen counter of the small apartment she shared with her aunt. The walls were bare except for a single photo tucked behind the coffee maker, its edges soft from handling. You heading out early again? Aunt Linda emerged from her bedroom, still in scrubs from her night shift at the hospital. Always do. Linda studied her niece with tired eyes. Grace, if there's trouble at school, there's no trouble. Because we can move again if we need to. I know it's been hard, all the relocating. But it's fine. Grace softened her tone, seeing the worry in her aunt's face. Really? Just high school stuff. Linda wanted to push, but she'd learned that Grace's walls were built too high and too strong for frontal assault. Instead, she poured herself coffee and pretended not to notice how Grace's hand trembled slightly as she reached for her backpack. Matthew would have been starting high school this year, Linda said quietly. Grace froze. They rarely spoke his name aloud, as if saying it might summon all the pain they'd both worked so hard to pack away. Yeah, Grace whispered. He would have. He'd be proud of you. You know, the way you've handled everything. Grace's jaw tightened. Would he be proud that I ran, that I wasn't there when… Stop. Linda's voice was firm. We've been through this. What happened to Matthew wasn't your fault. You were at a tournament. You couldn't have known. But Grace was already heading for the door. Her walls rebuilt, her armor back in place. I'll be home late, got a project to work on." Linda watched her go, then turned to the hidden photo. Two kids grinning at the camera. Grace, maybe 13, in a GI with a gold medal around her neck. And Matthew, 11, thin and artistic and beautiful, holding the certificate from his first violin recital, back when they still believed the world rewarded talent and kindness, back before they learned that sometimes the world just broke things for sport. Westfield High felt different that morning. Grace noticed it the moment she walked through the doors, the way conversations stopped. The sideways glances. The wide berth students gave her in the hallway. But it wasn't fear. Exactly. It was something more complex. Curiosity mixed with wariness, mixed with respect. She made it to her locker without incident, but found Ashley already waiting there. "We need to talk," Ashley said without preamble. "The video." "What video?" Ashley stared at her. "Are you serious? The parking lot? You versus Brandon? It's literally everywhere. My mom saw it on Facebook, and she doesn't even know how to use Facebook properly." Grace processed this information while spinning her combination. Okay. That's it, Grace. You're famous, or infamous. I'm not sure which yet. Neither matters. Ashley watched her swap books with the same methodical precision she did everything. "You really don't care, do you, about any of it? The popularity stuff, the social hierarchy. Caring requires energy I need for other things." "Like what?" Grace closed her locker and looked at Ashley directly. "Like making sure what happened yesterday doesn't escalate. Brandon's going to want revenge. It's how these things work. He hits, I defend. He hits harder, I defend harder. Until someone—" She cut herself off again. That distant look returning. "Until someone—" What? "Until someone doesn't get back up." The warning bell rang, but Ashley didn't move. "You've been through this before. Not just fights, but this whole cycle." Grace didn't deny it. "We should get to class." "Wait." Ashley touched her arm again, gentler this time. "Brandon's not in school today. His dad pulled him out for family business. But Kevin let slip that Mr. Hayes was furious about the video, like scarier than usual furious." Something shifted in Grace's expression, the first real emotion Ashley had seen her display. It looked almost like concern. How bad is his father, really? Ashley glanced around, then lowered her voice. "Remember when Brandon's mom left? There were rumors, hospital visits that didn't quite match up with football injuries. Mrs. Hayes's sister came to pick her up in the middle of the night, and she never came back. Brandon started wearing long sleeves even in summer." Grace absorbed this information, her mind calculating new variables. And nobody did anything. His dad owns half the businesses in town. He plays golf with the mayor. Who's going to do something? The late bell rang, but neither girl moved. Grace was seeing patterns now. Connections she'd missed. The way Brandon had flinched when she mentioned his father watching. The desperation beneath his aggression. The performance of strength hiding something broken. "I made it worse," she said quietly. "The video, the humiliation. His father's going to what, take it out on Brandon." Ashley's voice was bitter. "He's been doing that for years. At least now people are watching." But Grace was already moving, not toward class, but toward the exit. "Where are you going? To fix this? Grace, you can't just—" "I've run from enough things. Ashley, I won't run from this." Ashley watched her go, torn between admiration and dread. Then, making a decision that would change everything. She pulled out her phone. "Kevin, it's Ashley. We need to talk about Brandon." All of us do. Brandon's house sat on Maple Street like a monument to suburban success. Perfect lawn, perfect paint, perfect American dream facade, hiding the nightmares within. Grace stood at the end of the driveway, studying the windows, reading the story the house tried not to tell, the curtains in what must be Brandon's room corner window. Second floor were drawn tight, but his truck was in the driveway, parked at an angle that suggested haste or distraction. Beside it, the black Escalade loomed like a threat. Grace had faced down bigger threats. She'd stood in rings surrounded by crowds baying for blood. She'd held her own against opponents twice her size. But something about this house, this moment, made her hesitate. Then she thought of Matthew, of all the times she should have seen the signs, should have come home from training, should have chosen her brother over another trophy. She walked up the driveway. The doorbell echoed through the house like a warning. Heavy footsteps approached, not Brandon's. The door swung open to reveal Mr. Hayes in all his failed glory splendor. 6'4", still built like the linebacker he'd once been, with the kind of aggressive handsomeness that aged into cruelty. "Help you?" His voice was bourbon rough despite the early hour. "I need to speak with Brandon." Mr. Hayes's eyes narrowed, taking in her slight frame, her unwavering gaze. "You're the girl from the video, the one who humiliated my son. Your son humiliated himself. I just didn't let him humiliate me." Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. "Little girl, you have no idea who you're talking to." "I know exactly who I'm talking to." Grace's voice remained steady. "I'm talking to a man who never made it to the NFL, so he's trying to live through his son. I'm talking to someone who thinks fear equals respect and violence equals strength. I'm talking to a bully who raised a bully and can't understand why the cycle keeps repeating." The silence stretched taut between them. Mr. Hayes's face had gone from red to purple, his hands clenching into fists. "You need to leave. Now." "Dad," Brandon appeared behind his father, and Grace's suspicions were confirmed. A bruise darkened his left cheekbone, too fresh to be from yesterday's fall. "What's going on?" "Get back inside." "Mr." Hayes growled without turning, but Brandon had seen Grace. Something complex crossed his face: surprise, anger, and underneath it all, shame. "It's okay, Dad. She's just here about a school thing." "School thing?" Mr. Hayes turned on his son. "Like the school thing where you let a girl half your size make you look like a fool. That kind of school thing." Brandon flinched. "Dad, please." The backhand came fast, casual, like swatting a fly. Brandon's head snapped to the side, and Grace moved without thinking. She was between them before either Hayes could react, her stance wide, hands raised but open, not threatening, protective. "Enough," she said quietly. Mr. Hayes looked down at her with genuine bewilderment. "Are you out of your mind?" "Maybe. But I know what happens next if this continues. I know how it ends." Her voice cracked slightly. "I've seen how it ends." "Grace, don't," Brandon said, his voice thick. "Just go, please." But she didn't move. 3 years ago, my brother was being bullied. Every day, getting worse. I was training for nationals, always gone, always focused on the next fight. I told him to be strong, to endure, that it would get better. Mr. Hayes had gone still, something in her tone cutting through his rage. He started wearing long sleeves in summer, just like Brandon. Started flinching when people moved too fast. But I was 17 and selfish, and I thought my tournament mattered more than being home. Grace's voice was steady, but tears ran down her face. He hung himself in our garage while I was winning a gold medal I can't even look at anymore. The silence was absolute. Even the birds seemed to have stopped singing. So yes, Mr. Hayes, I know exactly who I'm talking to, and I know exactly where this leads. The question is, do you want to be the father who drove his son to that, or the one who stopped it before it was too late? Mr. Hayes's face had gone pale, his fists unclenching for a moment. She saw him clearly, not the monster, but the man underneath, broken, afraid, perpetuating the only pattern he knew. "Get out," he said. But the rage was gone, replaced by something hollow. Grace looked at Brandon. "You don't have to be him. You don't have to continue this. There's another way." Then she left, walking back down that perfect driveway on shaking legs. Behind her, she heard Brandon's voice, stronger than she'd ever heard it. "Dad, we need to talk, really talk, for the first time in, maybe, ever." By the time Grace made it back to school, third period was half over. She slipped into AP Chemistry to find the class in chaos, not the usual controlled chaos of teenagers avoiding work, but something electric. "Grace!" Ashley appeared at her elbow. "Where have you been? Things are happening. Big things. What kind of things? Come with me." Ashley led her not to class but to the principal's office, where a crowd had gathered. Through the glass doors, Grace could see Kevin Walsh, several other football players, 2 cheerleaders, and what looked like a detective taking statements. "After you left, I called Kevin," Ashley explained quickly. "Told him about Brandon, about his dad, and Kevin, he broke. Started crying right there in the hallway. Turns out he's been covering for Brandon for years, making excuses, helping hide the bruises." Grace watched Kevin gesture animatedly, pointing to his own ribs, demonstrating something for the detective. Once Kevin started talking, others came forward. People who'd seen things, teachers who'd suspected. That sophomore Marcus, he zoomed in from his new school to give a statement. Ashley's voice dropped. "Grace, what you did in that parking lot, it wasn't just about a fight. You started something that's been needing to happen for a long time." The office door opened, and Principal Morrison stepped out, looking haggard. Her eyes found Grace immediately. "Ms. Anderson, my office, please." Grace followed her through the chaos, aware of every eye tracking her movement. Principal Morrison's office was standard-issue administrative motivational posters, fake plants, the lingering smell of coffee and disappointment. "Sit," Morrison settled behind her desk, studying Grace with sharp eyes. "I've just spent an hour hearing some very disturbing things about one of our students. Things that, apparently, everyone knew but nobody reported, until today." Grace remained silent. "I've also watched a video, several videos, actually of yesterday's incident. Would you care to explain what happened? Brandon charged me. I redirected his momentum. He fell." "That's it. No martial arts background you'd like to disclose, no training that might be relevant." Grace met her gaze steadily. "I know how to protect myself. I learned because I had to. Because once upon a time, I didn't know. And someone I loved paid the price." Morrison's expression softened. "I pulled your records, Grace. 5 schools in 3 years. Each transfer marked family emergency. I also found some newspaper articles from California about a young MMA champion whose brother— Don't! Grace's voice was sharp. Please, just don't! Morrison leaned back. I'm not going to punish you for defending yourself, but I need to know, are you a danger to other students? Only if they're a danger to others first. That's not exactly reassuring. It's not meant to be. It's meant to be honest. They stared at each other across the desk. Two women who'd seen too much of the world's darker corners, finally. Morrison sighed. Brandon's been taken to the hospital for evaluation. His father is being questioned by police, and thanks to the students who came forward today, we're launching a full investigation into bullying and abuse in our athletic programs. What about Brandon? Morrison looked surprised. You're concerned about him, after everything. He's a victim too, just a different kind. Grace stood. If we only save the people we like, we're not really saving anyone. She left Morrison's office to find the hallway packed. Word had spread. The entire school seemed to be vibrating with the kind of energy that comes from witnessing something momentous. But Grace didn't want to be witnessed. She pushed through the crowd, ignoring the calls of her name, the hands reaching out to touch her like she was some kind of talisman. She made it to the bathroom before the shaking really started, locked herself in a stall and let it wash over her the adrenaline crash. The memories. The awful feeling of history trying to repeat itself. Her phone buzzed. That unknown number again. You did good today. He would be proud. A friend. This time. She typed back, "Who is this?" The response came immediately. Someone who knows what it's like to lose a brother. Someone who's been watching. Check your locker. Grace splashed water on her face and made her way to her locker, half expecting another prank. Instead, she found an envelope taped inside. No name, just a folded piece of paper with an address and a time. And at the bottom, for kids like Matthew, kids like Brandon, kids like us. The address led to a community center on the east side of town, the kind of place that survived on donations and determination. Grace arrived at the specified time to find a circle of chairs and a dozen teenagers she didn't recognize. At the center sat a woman in her 20s with kind eyes and visible scars on her arms. "Welcome," the woman said. "I'm Jamie. I'm a survivor. And if you're here, you are too." Grace almost left. But then she saw him, Brandon, bruised and hollow-eyed, sitting hunched in a chair across the circle. He looked up, surprised to see her. "I didn't think you'd come," he said. "I didn't think you would either." Jamie smiled sadly. That's the thing about survivors. We always think we're alone until we realize we're not. This is a support group for victims of bullying and abuse, a place to share stories, find strength, maybe even find forgiveness, for others, for ourselves. Grace sat down, around the circle. Others began to speak. A girl who'd been cyberbullied until she tried to end everything. A boy whose father's expectations had crushed him until he crushed others. Story after story of pain and survival, of cycles broken and battles won. When it was Brandon's turn, his voice was barely a whisper. "I became my dad. I thought if I was the one hurting people, no one could hurt me. But I was wrong. I was just spreading the poison." He looked at Grace. "I'm sorry. For the hallway. For lunch. For trying to— I'm just sorry." Grace nodded. "I know. I'm sorry too. For your pain, for not seeing it sooner." When her turn came, she told them about Matthew, about the gold medal she'd thrown away, about running from city to city, trying to escape the guilt, about learning that sometimes the bravest thing wasn't fighting, it was staying. "My brother left a note," she said, her voice steady despite the tears. "He said he was tired of being scared, tired of being small. He thought dying was the only way to be brave." She looked around the circle. He was wrong. This sitting here, sharing our pain, refusing to pass it on, this is brave. This is how we win. The session ended with phone numbers exchanged and promises to return next week. Brandon lingered as others filed out. "My dad's in custody," he said quietly. "My mom's flying in from Arizona. And Coach Davis, he wants me to talk to the whole team about everything. Says maybe, if they understand." "They will," Grace assured him. "People want to understand. They just need someone brave enough to explain." Brandon attempted a smile. "Funny how the girl I tried to bully ended up saving me. You saved yourself. I just didn't let you fall alone." Outside, Ashley was waiting by her car. "So, how was it?" Grace looked back at the community center, then at her new friend, maybe her first real friend in years. It was a beginning. 3 months later. Westfield High looked the same but felt entirely different. The trophy case still gleamed, but now it shared wall space with suicide prevention posters and anti-bullying pledges signed by every student. The hierarchies remained, but had softened at the edges, made permeable by the understanding that everyone was fighting invisible battles. Grace still walked to school, but no longer alone. Ashley picked her up most mornings. Their friendship deepened by shared purpose. They'd started a peer counseling program, training students to recognize warning signs and offer support. Brandon had returned after a month away, quieter but somehow more solid. He'd given up his captain position, but not football itself, finding joy in the game once it stopped being a weapon his father wielded. His testimony had led to 3 other abuse cases being investigated, creating ripples that spread far beyond Westfield High. The support group had grown from 12 members to 50, moving from the community center to the school itself. Jamie still facilitated, but increasingly, the students led themselves. They called it the Matthew Project in honor of all the kids who hadn't made it, who'd needed a hand up but found only fists. On the anniversary of Matthew's death, Grace stood at his grave with a different medal, not gold for fighting, but silver for finishing second in the state debate championship. She'd argued for mandatory mental health education in schools and lost by a single point. "Second place," she told the headstone. "You always said I was too competitive. Maybe you were right." She placed the medal on the grass and sat down, finally ready to have the conversation she'd been avoiding for 3 years. "I thought I failed you," she said. "Thought if I'd been stronger, faster, better, I could have saved you. But that's not how it works, is it? We can't save people. We can only show them they're worth saving." Wind rustled through the cemetery trees, carrying the distant sound of children playing. Life. Continuing on. "I found them, Matty. The other kids like you. The ones hiding their bruises, swallowing their screams. And I'm staying this time. No more running. No more fighting. Just helping the way I should have helped you." She stood, brushing grass from her jeans. "Brandon says hi. By the way, you'd like him. He's learning violin. Says it helps with the anger. Gives his hands something else to do besides make fists." A car honked. Ashley, waiting patiently as always. "I have to go. We're training new peer counselors today, but I'll be back. And Matty, I think we're actually making a difference. I think you would be proud." She walked back to the car, leaving the medal behind. She didn't need it anymore. She had something better: purpose. The video of her taking down Brandon still circulated online, gathering views and comments from people who saw only the surface. But in Westfield, they knew the real story. How a girl who'd lost everything learned that strength wasn't about winning fights, but about preventing them. How a boy who'd become his worst fear found the courage to change. How a school that had harbored darkness chose to let in light. Not all stories have happy endings. Matthew was still gone. Other kids still suffered in silence. The cycles of abuse and bullying ground on in countless other places. But sometimes, in one small town, with one act of unexpected courage, things shifted. A hand extended instead of a fist raised. A word of understanding offered instead of judgment. A circle of chairs where broken kids learned they weren't alone. And sometimes, that's how the world changes, not all at once, but one saved soul at a time. Grace smiled as Ashley chatted about their plans for the peer counseling session. Behind them, Westfield High stood ready for another day. Its hallways no longer a battlefield, but a place where ghost girls could become guardians, where bullies could become brothers, where the broken could find the strength to heal. 5 seconds, that's all it had taken to change everything. Grace was ready for it. 1 year later, the local news van pulled up to Westfield High on a crisp October morning. Grace watched from the window as reporters set up their equipment, preparing to document what they called the Westfield miracle, how one school transformed its culture of violence into a model of peer support. "You ready for this?" Brandon asked, adjusting his tie nervously. He'd been selected to speak on behalf of the Matthew Project, his transformation from bully to advocate making him the perfect spokesperson. "It's your story to tell," Grace said. "I'll be right there with you." They walked out together, the quiet girl and the former Jock, united by tragedy and triumph. Ashley met them at the door with a proud smile, holding the latest statistics: bullying incidents down 70%, student mental health referrals up 200%, and not a single suicide attempt in 12 months. As Brandon spoke to the cameras about second chances and the courage to change, Grace thought about Matthew, how one life lost had somehow saved dozens of others, how pain, transformed through love and action, could become purpose. The interview would air statewide, inspiring other schools to start their own programs. But for Grace, the real victory was smaller and quieter. It was in every kid who chose to speak up instead of suffer in silence. 5 seconds had started it all, but every day since, it had been the real miracle.